let's head to Saturday, December 30th, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, of course, between Ole Miss and Penn State. This is also a game that in a 12-team playoff is absolutely slated to happen. 10-2 teams, both of which lost to only elite teams. Ole Miss's only 2 losses, while not competitive, against Alabama and against Georgia. Of course, Penn State losing to Michigan and Ohio State. So clearly a second-tier class of teams, but no less interesting. What Ole Miss is doing off the field is fascinating, but the team itself is going to be under a lot of pressure to succeed next year, which means there's a lot of eyeballs that are writing checks in Oxford right now that are going to be keeping an eye on this game in a big way, because James Franklin also under some pressure. He's can't wait for the expanded playoff to get his 10-2 teams into the playoff every year. So this is again, while the outcome of this game does not mean nearly as much as it would if it's a playoff game, obviously, these are 2 coaches that are very geared towards a 12-team playoff. And this matchup is very much a likely one. Elite level line of scrimmage play for Penn State. How many of those guys are going to play? How does Ole Miss look on offense? There's a lot of intrigue here for me personally about next season, with both of these teams developing for next year. And I think there's a catapult factor here for both of these teams in this game.
No question. I think of some of the games outside of the playoff, Ole Miss versus Penn State is very high on my list of games that I'm absolutely fascinated by and will 100% be tuning into. I think for the sort of the theme is sort of what you laid out there, is that both of these teams won a lot of games this year, but they also lost to the elite competition. And to be fair, I think it's fair to say that, Penn State, while the scores maybe against Ohio State and Michigan were fairly close, it really wasn't like that competitive.
Right.
The gap seemed a little bit larger than what it was on the scoreboard. But that's also what it makes this game interesting. I think this is a fairly even game between 2 teams that lost to elite teams this year, and they go into next year with very high expectations because of what's coming back. And if you look at Ole Miss, the expectation is Jaxson Dart will be back. Quinshad Judkins, they have an awesome transfer portal class. So you look at the matchup of the Judkins, Dart, the weapons that Ole Miss has at receiver against Penn State's awesome defense. Manny Diaz is now the head coach at Duke. Chop Robinson isn't going to play, so they are going to be a little bit shorthanded, but still strong at the line of scrimmage. We know Ole Miss early in the year struggled with the offensive line and run game. Yep. Judkins got going eventually. So I'm fascinated just to see how some of these high-profile players, assuming they're in the game, are matching up in that battle. And then you've got Drew Allar for Penn State. I thought maybe played one of his better games against Michigan State in last week of the regular season. Interested to see if he can build on that in that stretch. And they still have an interim OC before Andy Koltanecki from Kansas takes over and some receiver questions, but an opportunity for Drew Allar to build some momentum for next year. I think, I hesitate to use the word bowl bump, but there's certainly a chance that one of these teams gets a lot of publicity going into the offseason based on what happens here.
Well, 2 quarterbacks with extraordinary talent that still feel like there's another gear. I mean, yes, absolutely, maybe 2 more for Drew Allar, but extremely talented. Dart maybe has 1 more big gear. He's a little bit more established, had a better season probably production-wise than Drew Allar did in terms of commanding the offense. I just am curious, like, how much time has Lane Kiffin spent on the game plan? Like, this guy is busy recruiting his own players to stay, paying them. He's busy recruiting players out of the portal, paying them. He's busy recruiting all the players in recruiting that you have to do now as a coach. Like, imagine if this was an actual playoff game, how much time do you actually have? Because Lane Kiffin's doing this unlike almost anybody else in college football, where he's like, no, we're going to keep everybody on our roster. We're going to go into the portal and take all your players, and we're going to sign a top 20 class in recruiting. Oh, by the way, while game planning for a playoff game, I don't know how you manage that. It's a little easier because this game is not a playoff game, obviously, but still, how much time is he spending game planning? Like, he's pulled in a million different directions. It's working for him right now, but I mean, Penn State's a 4-point favorite for a reason.
If you watched the Texas Bowl last year between Texas Tech and Ole Miss, I think it was fair to say that Lane wasn't exactly all that into that game. I think he'll be.
No,
I think he'll show up a little bit more this time, because something you mentioned there. I think if we start thinking about next year in the 12-team playoff, and Ole Miss is going for it. It's pretty obvious, and they should. With the core they have coming back, the transfers, they're going for it. So the offseason narratives can begin right here. at the Peach Bowl. I don't think we should read a ton into these games, but I would suspect that if you're Ole Miss and you can win this game, start to build a
Oh,
little momentum. Here
off
we
the
go. The hype,
expectations off the charts.
right? The hype on the Lane train is going to be astronomical. So
He might be spending as much time on Twitter as he will be on game planning this week. So I don't know.
yeah, he's
But
been
I agree.
quite active. Yeah,
I don't mind the like. Look, we're Ole Miss. We don't normally have national championship expectations, but we've had 10 wins regular seasons in the last couple of years with this coach and this structure of college football. Let's go. Let's go. I like it. Now, but again, if you beat Penn State, that then comes with what you're talking about. Offseason hype and
right.
expectations, which means you got to deliver next year. So and their schedule is manageable, by the way.
Yes.
Without the divisions in the SEC, Ole Miss and Missouri are the two teams that I like to. I know that's easy to say because they both won 10 games this year, but I think those are two teams that come back largely intact with schedules that set up for them to challenge for playoff spots next year. And Ole Miss is financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically all invested in this offseason. It's fun to watch to see if it works. That's for sure. Almost as fun as what the game should be coming up, of course, on Saturday, December 30th.